The defendant did not allege that the victim committed any acts of violence against her. Now, this is one thing that I did have highlighted. I don't know what happened, but this part right here is going to be important when in convicting Quadajah. The reason that this is going to be important, in number one, because the defense is going to use the fact that these two young ladies knew each other. So the defense is going to say she knew her, and so she was afraid of her due to previous violence or to previous incidents with Romeca that caused her to want to do, or to cause her to do what it is that she did. So this is really important here because the defendant, when speaking to officers and in court when she obtained her no stalking order, admitted that the defendant, that the victim has never committed any acts of violence against her ever before in life. In fact, she's never seen her before in person ever. But the important part here for the prosecution is that Quadajah admitted out of her own mouth on the day of September 8th and several times in court from December 2024 all the way up until July of 2025 that she's never truly she's never physically been in her presence. She was being threatened allegedly by Romeca by third parties. So the defense is going to say she has a reasonable belief. She has a reasonable fear against Romeca. The prosecution is going to challenge that by saying the fear is not reasonable because she's never been in Romeca's presence. She doesn't even know Romeca. She's never even really had an in-person encounter. And a lot of the incidents that Quadajah stated happened between her and Romeca were via third party, not face to face and not first party, not in person and not to each other. Okay, it was around. It was two family members and friends, according to Quadajah. We still don't know if that's true because we haven't seen any evidence of it. Okay, when I say we don't know if that's true, we don't know if the threats even ever happened. Okay, and we're gonna get into that. Now, that's the first thing the prosecution, I'm sure, is going to say. These two people have really met in person. They have a history with each other, but the threats that Quadajah is alleging have always been third party, according to Quadajah in court. As of the date of this incident, the defendant and victim have never met in person. September 8th, 2025, or hold on, y'all. Just before 8:30 a.m., witness one drove his black Mercedes SUV from his on.
Where are you watching from? Drop your city and country in the comments right now. We want to see our community from around the world. And if you're new here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button before we dive in. Some mornings begin like any other, school bags packed, lunch boxes tucked, a mother's kiss on her child's forehead before the school day begins. For Romeca Meeks-Blackmon, September 8, 2025 started exactly that way. The 31-year-old Chicago mother walked her 6-year-old son to school in the South Loop neighborhood of Chicago, tucking a loving note inside his lunchbox before saying goodbye. She was studying to become a nurse. She was rebuilding her life. She was, by every account from her family, a devoted and deeply loving mother. At about 9:05 a.m. on the 2200 block of South State Street in Chicago's South Loop, minutes after dropping her son off at school, an argument with another woman she knew turned violent. In the middle of the sidewalk near Cermak and State Street, the dispute escalated. The other woman produced a handgun and shot Romeca Meeks-Blackmon in the face. She was rushed to Quadajah Hospital. She did not survive. Her son turned 7 years old just days after the shooting and was still asking where his mother was. Left standing at the scene was a man who knew both women, a man whose choices had quietly set the stage for the confrontation that ended Romeca's life. His name was Carlos Smith, and everything about this case flows directly through him. This is the story of a tragedy rooted in a love triangle, a deadly mourning, a shocking murder charge, and an accusation of witness intimidation that has left Chicago stunned. Like this video. Share it for Romeca. Subscribe so you never miss a chapter. To understand what happened on September 8, 2025, you have to understand the man who connected every person in this story. Carlos Smith shares a child with both the victim and the defendant. He was present at the scene when the shooting occurred and is central to a case that has devastated two families. On one side was Romeca Meeks-Blackmon, 31, a mother, a nursing student, a woman described by her family as full of warmth and life. She shared a 6-year-old son with Carlos Smith. On the other side was Quadajah Holly Johnson, 31, a woman from Des Plaines who was in a current relationship with Carlos Smith. At the time of the shooting, Ms. Johnson was in a relationship with Carlos Smith, the father of her 6-month-old child and the child she was pregnant with. 2 women, 1 man, 2 children, and a morning that was about to become a murder scene. Just before 8:30 a.m. on September 8, Carlos Smith drove Quadajah Johnson and their baby from his home to her car, which was parked nearby. He double-parked his car, and the two of them moved their 6-month-old from his car to a car seat in her car. Romeca Blackmon had just dropped her child off at a school across the street. The 2 women were now within feet of each other. Carlos Smith was right there. What followed in the next few minutes would end one woman's life and send shockwaves through Chicago, the courts, and the internet. Where are you watching from? Drop your city below. Like, share, subscribe, keep this story alive. The confrontation on the sidewalk near Cermak and State Street happened fast, and what witnesses saw that morning has become the beating heart of this entire murder case. Romeca Blackmon's family noted that Holly Johnson had previously filed protective orders against Blackmon dating back to December 2024, and as recently as the summer, which they believe were meant to build a paper trail against her. Prosecutors say Johnson had never met Blackmon in person, even though she filed an unserved order of protection against her in December 2024, claiming threats through family members. A physical altercation broke out between the 2 women on the sidewalk. Witnesses at the scene alleged Carlos placed the victim in a headlock, and Johnson ran back to their car and brought out a gun, fatally shooting Romeca in the face. In the immediate aftermath, video circulated online showing Holly Johnson saying, "I have a concealed license to carry," and Carlos Smith, reportedly with blood on his hand, was heard saying, "It was self-defense." Romeca Blackmon was rushed to Quadajah Hospital, where she was pronounced dead. Prosecutors say Blackmon was unarmed. Holly Johnson stayed at the scene and cooperated with police. She was taken into custody and then released without charges. No charges were immediately filed against Carlos Smith either. Romeca's family was devastated and outraged, demanding to know why the woman who shot their daughter walked free. The community rallied, the internet erupted, and the case was far from over. Like and share this chapter. Romeca's story deserves to be heard everywhere. Subscribe. Next chapter covers the 3 months of silence that followed. For nearly 3 months after Romeca Meeks-Blackmon was shot dead on a Chicago sidewalk, Quadajah Holly Johnson walked free. No charges, no arrest, no accountability, at least not yet. Romeca's mother, Tina McMiller, stood at the very corner where her daughter was killed and demanded justice publicly.
For the first time, we are hearing from the father at the center of a fatal confrontation.
Carlos Smith shared children with 2 women, and now one of them is charged with murdering the other.
Tia Ewing has been following the story from the very beginning, and she has the latest.
A lot of details came out in court today for the hearing of Quadajah Johnson, including the fact that this was the first time when the shooting unfolded that she allegedly laid eyes on Romeca Blackmon. We know that she and Romeca Blackmon, they both have children, by the same man. And for the very first time, we are hearing from Carlos Smith. He was the man on the scene when this tragic shooting unfolded. So a lot of information came out in court today. Witnesses saying what they saw, but you were there. What's your reaction to what you heard came out in court today?
When I heard it, I'm just looking, it was unbelievable, but I was there. And I know for a fact none of that happened, how they just explained it. But my truth will get out here, and I hope everybody understand. That's really it. I can't even say too much right now, because it's just gonna feel like I'm going against them, they going against me, we just going back and forth. But the truth is going to come out.
Well, let's walk through this. So on September 8th, investigators say Johnson and the father of her child were near his home. They drove Johnson to 20 West Cermak, where her car was parked. They placed their 6-month-old into Johnson's car in the back seat. Around the same time, Blackmon had just dropped off her son at a nearby school and drove back to the area where Johnson and the father were. Witnesses told police the women argued. They reported the father pushing Johnson away and Blackmon standing with her arms crossed. They say he then slammed a car door on Blackmon and also put her in a chokehold. Prosecutors say Johnson broke free, and that is when, or I should say Blackmon broke free, and that is when Blackmon was shot once. And then that's when they say Johnson paused, then fired 2 more times. Police recovered 3 9mm casings there at that scene. Johnson legally owned the gun and claimed self-defense. Prosecutors say Blackmon was unarmed. Her son turned 7 days after the shooting and is still asking to this very day, where is his mother?
Carlos may be hurt for the rest of his life, but we make sure he see rainbows in his clouds. Amen. Okay? Nothing will ever change about that. There is nothing he needs that we cannot provide. He is perfectly well. He is happy. He is thriving. And even when he feels his lowest, we pull him out of it together like we do with each other. He is a superstar like his mom, and he's going to show her better than he can tell her.
As for Smith, he says he has not seen his son since the shooting unfolded, the son that he has with Romeca Blackmon. We did learn today that Quadajah Johnson is 7 weeks pregnant. She did ask for leniency from the court, hoping that she would be able to attend her trial going back and forth from home. We do know the judge did not allow that. As for her, she will be back in a courtroom come December 23rd. From the Greater Grand Crossing neighborhood, Tia Ewing, Fox Chicago.
She told reporters, "I just want justice. I don't want to fight with nobody. I don't want to argue with nobody. I just want justice for my daughter." The family also pointed out something deeply troubling, that Holly Johnson had filed protective orders against Romeca going back to December 2024, orders they believed were strategically designed to build a legal paper trail that would support a self-defense claim if things ever turned violent. Then on December 3, 2025, nearly 3 months after the shooting, everything changed. Quadajah Johnson was arrested in the 9200 block of West Senate Drive in Des Plaines after being identified as the offender who shot and killed Romeca Meeks-Blackmon. Johnson was arrested around noon on Wednesday in Des Plaines. On Thursday morning, she was charged with 1 count of first-degree murder. Dozens of supporters showed up at the Cook County Courthouse for the detention hearing, wearing pink in support of Blackmon. Holly Johnson's attorney immediately pushed for her release. The judge denied it. And now, for the first time, Carlos Smith broke his silence, and what he said raised even more questions than it answered. Drop your city in the comments. Where are you watching from? Like, share, subscribe. Justice starts with awareness. When Carlos Smith finally spoke publicly after Holly Johnson's murder charge, the internet did not know what to make of him. He appeared on camera, calm, measured, and carefully guarded in his words. Smith said some of the details being shared by witnesses don't match what actually happened. He said, "When I heard it, I'm just looking. It was unbelievable, but I was there. And I know for a fact none of that happened, how they just explained it. But my truth will get out here, and I hope everybody understands. That's really it. I can't even say too much right now. Because it's just gonna feel like I'm going against them, they going against me. We just going back and forth. but the truth is gonna come out. He was calling the witnesses liars. He was disputing the accounts of people who watched Romeca Meeks-Blackmon get shot in the face on a public sidewalk. In court, the picture grew even more complicated. The court emphasized that, except for Mr. Smith, whom it did not believe was an independent witness, none of the other proffered witnesses supported the defense's account. The judge effectively told the courtroom that Carlos Smith could not be trusted as a neutral party. He was not an independent witness. He was the man at the center of everything, the man whose relationship with both women had led directly to this moment. Then came the accusation that set the internet on fire all over again. Carlos Smith was accused of threatening a witness, and suddenly this case went from a tragedy to something even darker, like this chapter. This is the moment everything changed. Subscribe. Chapter 6 covers the witness intimidation accusation directly. This is the chapter that brought you here, and it is every bit as serious as it sounds. As the case against Quadajah, Holly Johnson moved through the courts, witnesses who were present on September 8, 2025 became critical to the prosecution's case. These were people who had stood on that sidewalk near Cermak and State Street and watched events unfold with their own eyes. Their testimony represented the difference between murder and self-defense, between conviction and freedom. And according to allegations that have circulated and been referenced in court proceedings, Carlos Smith was accused of making contact with at least one of those witnesses in a manner that crossed a serious legal line. The intimidation charges cover a specific window of the case, and defense counsel advised the court that Mr. Smith had reported to police that Ms. Blackmon had approached Ms. Johnson, a version of events that directly contradicted multiple eyewitness accounts. The court had already determined Smith was not an independent witness. Now the question being raised was whether he had gone further, whether he had attempted to influence, pressure, or threaten someone whose testimony could send Holly Johnson to prison for the rest of her life. Witness intimidation in a murder case is not a minor allegation. It is a felony. It is an obstruction of justice. And in a case already filled with pain, betrayal, and loss, the accusation against Carlos Smith added a layer of darkness that left Romeca's family and the watching public speechless. The man whose choices started all of this was now allegedly trying to control where it ended, like this video. Share it. This is why witness protection matters. Subscribe. Chapter 7 covers Holly Johnson's defense and the battle for her release. Inside the Cook County courtroom, Holly Johnson's defense team mounted an aggressive campaign for her release while the murder case moved forward. Her attorney, Ari Williams, filed motions arguing that the evidence against his client was being mischaracterized and that key witnesses could not have seen what they claimed to have seen. The defense pointed to several issues. They challenged the account of a witness who reportedly described seeing a fist bump between Holly Johnson and another person after the shooting, arguing that particular witness was not positioned to have seen it and had not initially reported it to police. Defense counsel argued that the state's witnesses could not have seen or heard as much of the incident as they claimed, and that particularly witness 3, who was the only witness to report the fist bump, was not in a position to have seen Ms. Johnson after the shooting and did not report this alleged fist bump to police initially. The defense also emphasized that Holly Johnson had stayed at the scene, cooperated fully with police, and had been released for nearly 3 months before being charged, pointing to this as evidence that the investigation had been rushed and the arrest premature. The court stated that it recognized Ms. Johnson seems to have led a law-abiding life, but the facts of the incident nevertheless indicated that she posed a real and present threat to eyewitnesses and to the community at large, which no conditions could mitigate. Bond was denied. Holly Johnson remained in custody, and Romeca Blackmon's family continued to wait for a trial, for a verdict, for the justice they had been demanding since the morning their daughter was shot dead dropping her son off at school. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. Every view keeps this story in the spotlight. As of April 2026, the case of People v. Quadajah Johnson continues to move through the Cook County court system. Holly Johnson remains in custody, charged with first-degree murder and 5 additional counts. Her appeals for release have been denied. Her trial date is pending. Carlos Smith remains a deeply controversial figure, a man the court has refused to recognize as an independent witness, a man accused of attempting to influence the testimony of witnesses in a murder case, and a man whose presence at the scene of Romeca Blackmon's death has raised profound questions about accountability and responsibility. Under the court's ruling, Ms. Johnson filed a notice of appeal on January 8, 2026, and the appellate court directed the circuit court to impose conditions of release, including that she possess no firearms. The legal battle is ongoing. The truth is still being contested in courtrooms and on social media. And at the center of everything is a woman who is no longer here to speak for herself. Romeca Meeks-Blackmon was 31 years old. She was a mother. She was a nursing student. She was a daughter. Her mother, Tina McMiller, said her daughter was loving, supportive, and an amazing mother. She tucked a note into her son's lunchbox the morning she died. Her son still had to grow up. Whatever the courts ultimately decide about Holly Johnson, about Carlos Smith, about witness intimidation and self-defense, one truth is permanent and undeniable. Romeca Meeks-Blackmon walked her little boy to school on an ordinary Monday morning and never came home. She deserved better. Her son deserved better. And this community deserves the full truth. Blackmon. Drop your city in the comments. Where are you watching from? Subscribe and turn on notifications. We will cover every court update as it happens. Share this video. The more people who know this story, the louder the call for justice becomes.